Hi everybody. Thanks for joining me for another video. And you see kind of the elements to what I'm going to be talking about today. I've had several people ask me, what is my process in creating stories? And I'm going to try to kind of go through some of that with you. Um, it, when the inspiration hits, then I just try to get the idea down as quick as possible because if there's too much time between the thought and writing it down, sometimes details are lost or the whole idea is lost. So I try to get it down, and I often use whatever is at hand. For example, had an inspiration this morning. Whether I use the story idea or not, time will tell. Sometimes I get these inspirations, I get the idea down, I get them on my laptop, kind of make a file for it, and then kind of see if I start thinking about it again to add to it, to see what I'm going to do with it, fill it out, make a story of either short story, novelette, or full-blown novels. Only time will tell on that. So on this happened actually this morning. I thought, well, I'll share this idea with you because I've been trying to figure out how to explain the process, and it's always best by show and tell. What happened this morning was, this is my insulin pump, and it woke me up. I'm off today from my job, and it woke me up earlier than I wanted to get up because it needed power. So I got up, and went ahead and recharged it. And it's good, rechargeable batteries. My old pumps way back when, you just pop the batteries out, put them back in. So this is a little more of a headache, not as convenient, but so I was sitting there letting it recharge and just sitting there. And I got to thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I could just charge it that way? Just hold it, recharge it. The body has its own electrical current. And that's what her nerves work off of and everything. And so I thought, wow, that'd be so cool. And I thought, huh, what if people, special people, were power banks? What about people who are deemed like hyperactive? Could they be hyperactive because they have extra electrical current that they can kind of bleed off that, that extra electrical current and power devices. And then it would help them because then it would help them calm down. And so they wouldn't need drugs, they wouldn't need anything like that. And it could be discovered by accident by a scientist who had a friend who was kind of in that hyperactive category, and noticed that when his friend used, let's say, his phone, he noticed that the power level would go up. He tried that several times. Then he started thinking about it more, and he started investigating more. And they found, some of these people could do that. And how green of an energy is that? It's natural. You don't have any byproducts from it or anything else. And in fact, it helps the person. So I thought about that while I was charging up my pump. And I thought, I'm going to start writing this down. This might make an interesting story. So while I was sitting there, I had an envelope nearby and a pen, and I started writing it out. Okay, my writing can be hard to read. And sometimes when I'm writing really fast, it can be hard for me to read. So a lot of the times I try to get things down like on my tablet, or even I have a phone, segment that program that I can put in notes and everything, just so I have something to go back to. So I was sitting there just jotting things down, and I'll try to read to you what I have so far. So my working title is Power Banks. See, hyperactive individuals have extra electrical currents causing their hyperactive status. When the world's electric grid is diminished, it was accidentally discovered that these individuals can recharge batteries by holding them. so like the devices. It also helped them calm the individuals. After research that it wasn't just that one individual, then it was discovered that several, or most everybody, that were hyperactive, um, hyperactivity, could do this. So these people were sought out as sources of green energy, and they started becoming well regarded, very important. They hired agents to take care of the finances and make appointments, stuff like that. They're very well paid. They were becoming rich and, of course, well respected. Um, then they even had, let's say, some of the technology that would involve to help them do this, to do multiple devices. I'm filling this in for more complete thought. So they had like special beds that were developed so that as they slept, they would, recharge multiple devices, or they had special clothes so that they could recharge them while they're on the go, put them like in pockets or whatever so they could still pick up the power. And as the power grid, whatever's happening to create a diminishing in our normal power resources, that's something I'll have to develop if I'm going to go forward with this, is further diminished. Then they started using multiple people, as like power banks, to like power up the power grid, the homes and businesses and so forth. And then as they grew stronger, these people, these individuals, they became more powerful. And they also started to abuse their power. Then people started to fear them. So they were rounded up to occupy powerhouses, kind of like slave labor. And they were started to become exploited. And then it started becoming, as years went by and everything, newborns would be tested. If they found to have this ability, then they were taken from their parents, and then they were trained and they were used, and they weren't educated because now they were considered, essential, but as essential as their ability and not for the individuals themselves. So, and of course, if they disobeyed, they were short-circuited, and I'll have to figure out what that means, how it's going to do. But they weren't killed. Okay, still the preservation of life, but they were short-circuited. And I ran out of envelope room, so I opened it up so I could write down the rest of my thoughts. So now we have one individual who, back in the day when they first started to kind of force these people into use and power banks and everything, and he fought against it. He was short-circuited. He was in a coma. And so when he woke up and saw how bad things were, he escaped, and he started to try to he had regained his abilities and found out how badly things had become, for his people. And I'll try to figure out what term to use for these type of people. Then he goes about to free them, and then he also finds that he could, with his ability, blow up devices and blow up businesses by overloading, the power grids in those areas. So he becomes very dangerous in that respect. And then he also teaches some of the others to do that. So then they have, the normal people under. There's a war going on between those that can have this ability, that have this internal power that they could use. And so they try to demand, fair and human rights, or they would leave the planet. They would go somewhere else. They had the ability. They could power a rocket or some sort of spacecraft just from their, combined abilities. But they also need to have a way to bleed it off on a consistent basis so that they could not be hyperactive. So Now, if they left the planet, and that's all the power source that's left on Earth, or whatever planet, this might be another planet, and that would send the civilization back to the Dark Ages with no power or anything else. So there's a give and take here, and they're trying to find a balance. So if they can somehow broker some sort of peace deal or some sort of accord, so that all parties are fair to each other, and yet they both have a win-win, type things. So let's see, how do I end this? The power banks, those are the people. That's just a working term. So they need to bleed off the extra energy so that they can settle down. The normals needed to have the power to function as a modern society. So can they achieve this? Can they look past how each group has wronged the other group over this period of, it could be hundreds of years, establish this, or is the normal humans can be left in the Dark Ages as these people with this ability go off and form their own colony on another planet. So, I don't know. You can let me know in the comments if you feel like this is a story worth developing, or if it's something sounds kind of stupid, or what. I mean, I write these down. I've got several, on my laptop. I've got them under file names and everything. Sometimes I go back and develop them. I've got several that haven't been published yet or even shared yet. So, so that's kind of a rundown on the process that I go through to start a story. And this may rest for days, months, years before I, revisit it. It just kind of depends, I guess, on if something else kind of sparks further ideas to develop it. So from this, what I will do is start to put it in my laptop, and then, oops, sorry folks, and I'll sit. And I remember these stories. Time will go by. I'll remember them. I'll go back to them. If I feel like, oh, well, maybe that's not a good idea, I may not touch it again. And I'll feel that about some stories. And it's like, wait a minute, maybe I can make this work and to be of interest to people. And then I'll go back and revisit it. It's all a very fluid situation, when it comes to creating. So this is like a start of a new story. Whatever happens to it, who knows? But like I said, if you think it's interesting, you'd like to see it develop, leave a comment. If you feel like it's kind of stupid, we'll leave that comment too. Like I said, this is the very beginning. This is the rough draft. When I enter it into the computer, then I'll add more to it. Sometimes, some other things. I might go ahead and get names for these power banks. I may put a little more detail in as I'm typing it in. I do not write when I type it into the computer, I do not do it verbatim. Sometimes I can't read the words that I've written down in haste. So, I'll just think about, okay, where was I? Try to go with this. I'll try to, start smoothing it out, start filling in the story as I'm entering it into the computer. And then sometimes, the imagery will start to becoming more developed. I'll add more to the story. In fact, after I get the first rough draft done, every time I go through and proofread, I add more to the story. I'll go, okay, wait a minute. It's kind of slow here. What can I do to liven it up? Let's see. Wait a minute. That's not very clear. What was I trying to say? I have read parts where I'm just like, what was happening? I wrote this. I don't even understand. So I'll go back and try to, I'll read around, that part, and I'll try to fill it in. Sometimes changing the course of the story. Sometimes changing some things going on. Sometimes I select and delete At times that can be hard to do because I like the phraseology or like the words. Sometimes I'll select and cut and put in another file because I might like something about the wording or the description that I want to save. So I have a file of these cut out, pieces. I actually have files that they're not really anything already in stories, but I'll be driving along and I'll see something, I'll have a description come to mind. Like one time I was driving along and I looked up in the sky. It was it was overcast, but the clouds were bumpy looking and they're dark on the bottom. And it kind of reminded me of like upside down burnt bread rolls, like when you put them all together in the pan, or cobbler, or something to that effect. Or even marshmallows, burnt marshmallows. You put them all in a pan, and you just, the tops are burnt, and they're still kind of bumpy. And I have other descriptions like that. I don't remember them all right now. That's why I put them down, in a file. So, and that's where I can go back to if I'm having trouble describing something at the time. I'm in a story, I'll go back to that file and see if something I can grab out of that and use. So inspiration for stories can be like this. I was waking up by my insulin pump, needing energy, and then that wish of, can I do this some other way? Then that's how this came to be. I have other stories. I've got one that I've developed a little bit more, still in rough draft, called Ravenbow. And that one was actually a story that came from a crossword puzzle game I was doing online. I always play the computer. And there was in the close proximity of a couple of the words raven and bow. I thought, whoa, that's kind of cool. So I started to develop that. I left the crossword game, which I play the computer, so it doesn't care, and started to write down what I was thinking about. How could I use that in a story? So I developed a fantasy story. It's actually, I never thought I'd write about zombies, but it's got zombies in it. But it is when I started to fill out the story and during my proofreading process and adding more, I've actually gotten a line in there where I can expand this world even more. So it's a short story right now. It may not remain as a short story, maybe a novelette or a novel, or it could be a prequel kind of short stories. You see how some authors will put out kind of a prequel type of thing to lead you into the main stories. Kind of like a sample, before you eat the meal or, something like that. So I might use it as that. I've written, another cat short story. And it's sitting there. I've written another fantasy one that I named Two Hearts. And I have a bunch of them on my laptop that I may go back to and develop more. It just kind of depends how it goes, how my creative process, goes on. So this is one example of inspiration. Some others are things that people have said that kind of triggered a thought. One was Cloud Riders. I might have mentioned it in the Cloud Riders segment, but that it was a comment my husband had made about what would happen if humanity was split in two parts and had a boundary between, and then that boundary was removed, and then what would happen, in the interaction, because they would develop differently. So that's where Cloud Riders originally came from. Time Stealers. I know I mentioned the inspiration in the Time Stealer segment, where it was trying to figure out how to get everybody home after I call them clock shows down in Houston. And we had a grandfather case, and I was teasing my young son, who was very tall and thin, he could ride back in that. It didn't happen, of course. But then I started thinking of who would live in clocks, and that led to the whole Time Stealer saga. So, and then Path of Totality. I don't know if I've gotten into detail on the inspiration on that, but that's where we were going to watch the eclipse a couple of years ago. And we went to Missouri because it was in the middle of the path of totality, the path of total darkness that's created during the eclipse. And I wanted the longest time possible to experience the eclipse. My son wanted to go and to see this phenomenon, to the fullest extent. And my son and I had been making the arrangements and everything and seeing where we're going to go. My husband, of course, was interested, but he was kind of letting us do all the planning. And as we were driving around to find the small town where we decided to try to go to, figuring maybe it wouldn't be as crowded as some of the other places, along the path of totality. And I mentioned Path of Totality, and he was driving, and he kind of looked at me. He goes, "Path of Totality?" He goes, "Is that one of your stories? I would so read it." And so that to me sounded like a challenge. So during the rest of the trip, I was trying to figure out Path of Totality. How could I use it as a title? What kind of story would come from that? But it was not going to be about an eclipse. So, and that's where the world that was created in that, which actually the story starts with a pandemic. I promise you, it was before the COVID pandemic. In fact, it was released the October 2019, right as there was starting to become talk about this disease that was happening in China. And then the world, as you know, everything went different. But in my story, the pandemic there was definitely man-made. It was supposed to be a vaccine to help humanity. Backfired tremendously because it was released without all the testing. And it wound up where humanity had to be, for children to be born and live, they had to be in enclosed environments. But what was not told to humanity to keep them trapped was that once they passed puberty, they could go out into the world where the virus still existed. Don't want to give too much about that plot. I may do a longer sequence about that, but that is the basic plot and the inspiration for Path of Totality. Cat Hunters was actually one that it was my imagination again. We were coming out of Half Price Books in Dallas, one of the big ones, and the street we're going on, it was actually apartment buildings, but there's a lot of trees in front of it. Kind of looks like a forest. It was a dark night and it was very misty. And I just had this image, I didn't see it, okay, it was my imagination, of a woman running frantically through that forest, that misty forest. That's how Cat Hunter started. So maybe one of these days I'll read the prologues to some of these stories to see if maybe it's something that you want to read. In fact, I think with Cat Hunters in the Cat Hunter segment, I read some of it, some of the beginning. I didn't read the full prologue, but some of the beginning of that. I am definitely not a voice artist, so you have to excuse my foibles or foibles, however way you want to put it. So this is just a little bit more, like I said, as far as the writing process. I'm trying to think of anything else I can share. If you have any questions, why don't you put them on the comments? I'll go through the questions. I'm thinking about doing an interview type of thing. I mean, I've got an official interview, author interview already on this channel, but to do one where, y'all are asking me questions. I have some people that have already sent me questions. I've done a few written author interviews like on Instagram. I can pull from those questions. I can pull from some other questions that I've been asked over the years and try to just sit down and talk about things, you know. Some of this may have already answered a lot of your questions. But I might talk about the publishing process, trying to get recognized as an independent author, how it works. When I'm writing, that's something I may share right now. Is when I'm writing, um, it's not I can't sit down and write like 6 8 hours straight. I get to a point where I have to have breaks. Well, I'll go. What do I do? Sometimes I'll do some other craft or something else, using my imagination, creativity. Sometimes I will, there's always housework to do. So go wash dishes, start a load of clothes, doing just this and that, kind of breaking away from the writing process. It can be pretty intense. This is not, uh, I can't say it's work that is very simple and very easy. The creative process to me is very fun. Getting the ideas down and all that, developing them and all that is just really fun. But when it comes down to the proofreading and all that, and when it gets to a point where I have nothing else to add, then it becomes kind of, it's like a marathon, where it's just trying to get to the finish line, trying to get to a point where I feel comfortable to send it to my editor. And so it takes time. There's a lot of mental energy. And so to break that up, to be able to handle the intensity, I guess, of the mental energy, go do something else. Try to break away for a minute, give that part of the brain a rest, and go do something like physical where you don't have to, think much, that sort of thing. Sometimes I'll just get to the point where I just need to watch a show, and just kind of, just try to break away from the thinking about that particular story. Sometimes I'll start another story, and it just kind of depends. I have actually stopped in one story that I'm writing because an idea will come to mind, and I'll go ahead and open another file and start putting in the idea of the other story until that inspiration is depleted. And then I'll save it. I'll put it in my files of things to do, I guess, and then I'll go back to the story I was working on before. Another process to the writing is, what if I get to a point, like I said, where inspiration ends and I can't go any further? What do I do? Well, I'll usually go and wash dishes, or I'll go do, laundry, or I'll do vacuuming, or I'll do something else. And then coming back to that story, if it still doesn't restart, sometimes I'll just, okay, I'm done for the day. And then if I go back to it and I still just can't get that going again, just can't get those wheels going and producing more uh, words and sentences and ideas and scenes or conversation or whatever, then I will read through either from the beginning or from the beginning of the chapter or something like that. And as I go along, I'll kind of proofread, correct grammar, stuff like that. And I'll try to pick up that thread again, pick up that momentum again, and see if we can move forward. Most of the time that works. But there has been a few points, like Cat Hunters, I had gotten to a point I couldn't get past because I couldn't decide. I left so many clues on who could be the bad guy that I couldn't get past the point of who was I going to actually make a bad guy. So, well, you can read the story and see what the resolution I came to it. But every time I try to go back to that story, I'd read through it, and then boom, it would end right there. I had to make a decision in the plot. So that went on for several years. And it wasn't until I could get past that point, until I made a decision on how I was going to move forward, I finally got that one finished and released. So yeah, there can be, writer's block is a real thing. There are ways to get around it. Um, there is, you know, another thing that I've seen, like in writers groups and recommendations to writers, is write a certain amount of words per day. If you watch the second Time Stealers interview that I have with J.T. Crawley on Talking Books, he asked me that question about, what do you feel about writing a certain amount of words per day? And I said, I can't do that. I have to have the inspiration to get started, or at least, I'm in a mindset to work on my stories. And that way, if I need to reread, the material to kind of pick up and go, or what, but I have to be in the mode. I have to be in the frame of mind or whatever. By writing just words without inspiration, just to have, number of words, has never worked for me. I tried to do that and it was just trash. And so I've tried to dream up stories, just trying to take some elements and make it without that inspiration. And it's just, nah, it doesn't go. I mean, it's flat, doesn't go anywhere. There's nothing to it that wants me to continue doing something like that. So that's why some people may call my writing erratic, as far as like when I release things and so forth. I do still have a job, so that can take time. Sometimes I feel like writing. Now I'm at work, and by the time I get home, I'm too tired to write. So there's that balance, between things. So that kind of hopefully gives you a little bit more on, I guess, way my mind works. I do have an overactive an imagination. I always have since I was a kid. Oh, yeah, a little bit about me as a kid. I remember one time, because I see things visually. Okay, I read a lot when I was a kid. And then I started to, first I would kind of think about those stories and kind of make my own extensions off of it. And then I found out that I could build my own worlds, my own stories, and I would visually see them like a movie in my head. I remember one time, I was probably about, 10, 12, something like that. I was sitting in my room. I was on the end of the bed, and I was looking toward, my dad had made a big desk that fit into the wall. And I was sharing the room with my sister. So it was my desk and her desk, side by side. And it went from floor to ceiling. Whoops. Between the desk and the bookshelves. And I was just sitting there. I was just staring off into it. And I didn't realize that the room had gotten dark. And I was just sitting there staring off into space. And my mom comes in. She turns on the light. It was just like boom, it pulled me out of my movie, so to speak. And then she asked me, "What's wrong with you? You're just sitting there in the dark." So that's what I can do. I'll just start to think of the story. I guess that's how it looks to other people. I'm just staring off into space. And then now, back then I wasn't writing them down. But now when that happens, I start writing them down. Anything around. Old envelopes, pieces of napkins. I've even used napkins. I've even used receipts. That's really hard to write on some of them. Just anything that's around. A scrap of papers. I try to keep a notebook with me. But lately I just try to use my tablet, my phone, and then try to get it onto my laptop. And then, like I said, kind of let it simmer, let it marinate, whatever you want to call it, until I revisit it. And hopefully, develop it more. So, will I develop this? I don't know. I may. If there's interest in it, I may. If it's a stupid plot, tell me. But just wanted to show you how some stories do start. So if there's any questions, please put them in the comment. If there's anything you'd like to add, compliment, tell me that this is terrible, let me know. I appreciate any input. I'd like to hear from y'all. A little feedback, a little conversation. I think that's very cool. I very much enjoy talking with readers or people who are interested in my books. I always consider myself an introvert, but when I started to have like little mini author events, like at the clock shows or the NAWCC district meetings in their showroom, I very much enjoy talking with people who come by the table, some who have read the book, some who haven't, and just kind of chat about the weather, chat about, the last one I was at, I was crocheting, just kind of filling the time while I was sitting there. I call it sitting with purpose. I was crocheting along, and I'd have women come by. We'd talk about crocheting, and then they start looking at my books, and we'd start to chat about that. But I enjoy it. I enjoy talking with readers. I enjoy talking with fans, and soon to be fans, I hope. And I'm hoping that we will have some major announcements to make in the near future. Time will tell. Has become my favorite phrase right now. Time will tell. So if you'd like more videos on the author process, the writing process, if you have any specific questions that I haven't covered in this, please let me know. Because I try to think of everything I can. Sometimes I leave gaps I don't realize. So if help me out here to create videos that are interesting to you, that you have specific points you want me to make, or anything like that. And hopefully I can kind of fill in those gaps. If you're a budding writer, I would like to encourage you, or any budding creative type of person. I found out that one of my people I work with, she's a singer-songwriter, and she also is a photographer. I'm like, wow, how can I help you with this? And we chatted about different creative processes and everything. And there seems to be a similar type of creative process. Not exactly the same, of course, but it is something that I find just awesome. Creative people, use your creativity. The world needs it. The world wants it. You may not have like a huge following at first, but go for it. See what happens. You won't know until you try. So, and people who enjoy that creativity, let them know. When you watch their videos or you see their vlogs, blogs, whatever on any of the social media, let them know. Encourage them. If you have something that you feel like they need a little bit of brush up on, let them know. Do it kindly, creatively, But it's those who like to be creative would like to be able to help or give people a product that they enjoy. But I know one thing, not everybody's going to enjoy the same thing. I know there's some people that like romance novels. They're probably not going to like mine. There's a little romance in there, okay? Don't get me wrong. And there's some people who like westerns. Well, this is not a western. Nothing I write is western. I am fantasy, sci-fi. That's what I enjoy writing when I'm in the fiction world. I do children's books, and I have done a series of devotional books. That's my nonfiction type of thing. It's all under P. Claus. You can find them out there, and it's just different parts.